Hi, my name is Lester Stewart from Warren Middle School. I want to take this opportunity to go over fractions, decimals, and percents and how to convert them back and forth. Let's start off with the simplest ones, decimals and percents. And this is what I tell my kids. When you say the alphabet, you go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. So, with this in mind, think of D as decimals, P's as percents. So when you want to convert back and forth between them, it takes two movements. Well, notice if I will start at D, decimal, and I want to go to percent, well, is percent to the left or to the right of decimal? When you look at it, percent is to the right of decimal. So I'm going to move my decimal 1, 2 places that way. From wherever my decimal is on my decimal number, I'm going to move it 2. So for instance, if I want to take 25 hundredths and I want to make it into a percent, I'm going to take my decimal place and I'm going to go 1, 2, 2 places to the right. And that's going to make it 25%. Okay. Let's do another example. Let's take the common number of 1. 1 is equal to the whole number. It means everything is in it. Okay? So, remember, if you never see a decimal, there's always an imaginary decimal at the end. So I'm going to go 1, 2. Well, now you got 2 empty spaces. And it's like an egg carton. When you have the egg carton, what goes in there? Eggs. So now you have 100. Well, so now if I have 1, I make it into a percent. 1 is now equal to 100%. Let's do an example of a percent to a decimal. Well, once again, let's draw our D and P. D for decimal, P for percent. So if I'm going to go percent to a decimal, I'm going to go 1, 2 places to the left, wherever my decimal is in my percent. So let's say you hear there's a 1.5% increase. Or there's a 1 5/10 increase. Well, take my decimal. If I want to go decimal to percent, I'm going to move it 1, 2, 2 places to the left. So my new number now is going to be 15 thousandths. Let's try another example. Let's say if I had 100%. If I had 100% and I wanted to make it into a decimal, well, where's your decimal here? Because there's not one given. Remember, if you never see a decimal, there's always one at the end. So that means I'm going to move it 1, 2, 2 places to the left, so 100% equals 1. Okay. So now I'm going to give you a couple minutes to work out a few problems on your own to see if you can move it back and forth. I want you to take 9/10 and make it into a percent. I want you to take 10% and make it into a decimal. Take this opportunity now to do these 2 examples. Well, let's take a look at it. I have 9/10. I want to take this decimal and make it to a percent. So if I want to go decimal to percent, remember my decimal is going to go 2 places to the right. So 9/10, I'm going to go 1, 2, another placeholder, so 9/10 equals 90%. If I have 10% and I want to make it into a decimal, so once again I have decimal percent, I want to make it percent into a decimal. I'm going to move my decimal places 2 places to the left. So that's 10, 1, 2. My answer would be 1/10. Now, could I put the 0 here? Yes, I could. Will it change the value? No, it won't. I can put zeros till infinity and beyond, and it's not going to change the value. Where it changes the value is if I put that 0 in between my decimal and a number. Then it changes the value. So let's take this opportunity now to work out decimals to fractions. And you could do this one of two ways. This is what I tell my kids to do. I have this decimal and I want to make it into a fraction. Here's what I tell my kids to do. Write the number you see. The number I see is 25. I'm going to write 25 and I'm going to put it over my fraction bar. Okay? Now, look up here. How many place values do you see with your decimal? I have the tens and I have the hundreds. So that's 2 place values. Those 2 place values are going to represent zeros down here. And your decimal will always represent the 1. So 25 hundredths represents 25 over 100. Okay? That's one way to teach the students this, for those who like to see verbal. But for the auditory students, the ones who like to hear it, when you say this, I ask them, how do you say this? Not 0.5, but I ask them to say it mathematically, the proper mathematical words, verbiage, so to speak. This is 25 hundredths. So what's the number you say? 25 hundredths. What's the first word you say? 25. And then you say, well, this is tenths, that's hundredths. My number goes all the way up to the hundredths. So that would be 25 over 100. Okay? And at this point, I then take the opportunity to refresh my kids over place value. We have a decimal, 1, 2, 3. The first plot after the decimal is called the tens. The second place value after the decimal is called the hundredths. So we go tenths, hundredths, and then finally it comes thousandths. So here's the deal. Whatever my last number, whatever place value it ends in, I'm going to put it over that number. So this one would be 10. This one I would put it over 100. If it was over the thousandths, I would put it over 1,000. Okay? And that is for the kids who like the auditory hear it. So tens, hundreds, thousands, that's the way for them to do it. So for instance, if we had $37 hundredths, well, say your word, 37. What place value is it? 37 hundredths. So hundredths, I would write over 100. Okay? That's how you do it auditorily. Well, once again, if you're more the visual person, this one will work for you. Okay? 37, still write your number. For each my auditory people, or my visual people, they do 37 over 2 zeros. This 7 represents that 0. 3 represents this 0. And my decimal represents the 1. So that's 37 over 100. Okay? So, that 7 represents the hundreds. 3 represents the tens. The decimal takes the place of the 1. That's 2 different ways that you could do it. Well, Mr. Stewart, what happens if I get a percent and I want to make it into a fraction? Well, you could do 2 different ways of this. Let's say you have 45%. Some students know to take your percent and automatically put it over 100 and you're good, you're golden. So I could take 45 and automatically put it over 100. And I know that's my answer. Some students, to them, it comes that easy. Most students, and personally for me, I like to think about it this way. I'll take my percent and I'll make it into a decimal. So 45% equals 45 hundredths, because remember, I'm going to move my decimal 2 places to the left, which will put it in front of the 4. So here's my number. Well, how do you say it? 45 hundredths. So 45 over 100, or I have 2 decimal places, so that's going to be 5 represents the hundredths, 4 represents the tenths, the decimal represents the 1. That's your 2 different ways of doing it. Okay? So now, what happens if I have let's change this up in the new screen. What happens if you have 1 3/10? And I or your math teacher asks you to make 1 3/10 into a decimal, or excuse me, into a fraction. Well, think about it, 1 3/10. Here's what I tell my kids. It's kind of like a dividing section. Everything to the left of the decimal represents a whole number. It's an entire meal. It's an entire ticket. It's an entire everything. It's full. It's complete. Anything to the decimal and right represents an incomplete. It's not a whole value. So if I have this, my 1 represents a whole number. So since that 1 represents a whole number, that's a complete pizza. That's a complete pie. So that would be written as 1. So now I take at it and I look at it as if it's just this, 3/10. Well, we've just reviewed on how to make a decimal into a fraction. I can take 3 and put it over. My 3 represents the 0. My decimal represents the 1. 1 and 3/10. So 1.3 or 1 3/10 equals 1 and 3 over 10 or 3/10. Let's do another example. What if I had 56 and 73 hundredths, and I want you to make it into a fraction? Well, once again, take your whole number. What's your whole number? 56. It's a complete pie. It's a complete pizza. Now take a look at your decimal. 0.73 or 73 hundredths. Well, 73, 1020, decimal represents the 1. Well, or you could say it 73 hundredths, 73 over 100. So that's how you make 56 and 73 hundredths into a fraction. This concludes the fractions, decimals, and percents. Hopefully you have found this meaningful and helpful for you. Thank you for your time.